When I worked with Photopass several years back, there were basically two different ways that photographers could see the pictures that were being taken. And sometimes when you were looking at photos, you would occasionally see things that you wish you hadn't. Back when I worked with Photopass, there were a couple of different ways that the pictures that the photographers took were reviewed. One of those was along with the guests, and that was in a place that we called The View. Each different park had a different Photopass store where the guests could come in, bring their cards, and we would be able to scan the cards and pull up all of their pictures. We called them The View, and it didn't matter where it was, whether it was Hollywood Studios at the store called Cover Story. Over at the Magic Kingdom, our view was in the Grand Expo, right in the middle of the store. We also had one at Toontown when it used to be there. Epcot, it was actually right underneath Spaceship Earth at one of the stores on the side. And over at Animal Kingdom, it was on the way out. We also had one over at Downtown Disney and at a couple other resorts as well. Any of those, a guest could walk up, hand you their cards. We would then scan the card and we could pull up all of the pictures that we'd had on file for them. And this would allow us to browse through the pictures and show the guests and add on frames and artworks. And if you've ever been inside a theme park and bought pictures, you've seen what the View does. But Disney's View also had a few extras on it. One of the wonderful things that you could do at Disney's View was you could actually pull up any pictures at any of the Disney parks or photo locations. And you could actually search for those photos. So if a guest came in, you pulled up their card and they were missing pictures, you could actually do a search for their pictures, find them, and then actually attach the guest Photopass card to it, and so they would have those pictures. So for example, if the day before they had gotten a picture with Mickey at one of the parks, you could actually look up Mickey Mouse at that park, give an approximate time when they were there, and it would actually pull up all the pictures and you could just scroll through. Well, I love doing that on days when I got stuck in the View. View was alright, I didn't mind it, but it wasn't my favorite place, I'd rather be shooting. But I figured if I didn't have guests at the time, and typically in the mornings you didn't, it was really slow, I would still make use of my time. And I'd use those search filters in the View, and I would pull up different locations and see what other photographers are shooting. So for example, if I wanted to see what people at Magic Kingdom were shooting that day, I could just pull up all the pictures from on Main Street at Magic Kingdom and just browse through the pictures and see what they were doing and if they were striking different poses that maybe I didn't know or different positions. I love pulling up pictures with the characters, because that would allow me to see some of the other things that other photographers are trying. One of the things that you want to do if you are a photographer is you want to help develop what we call the photographer's eye. It is basically a matter of learning different angles and being able to see photographs in a different way. So when you're taking it, it's a beautiful picture, not just a regular one that anybody could take, but something special. And so I was constantly looking for things like that. It was a great way for me to be able to grow as a photographer. That was open to any photographer at any time, and if you weren't dealing with guests, it was a great way to pass the time. However, I also had the opportunity to work another department of Photopass that at the time was part of regular Photopass and eventually got split off into its own department. And that was QA, or Quality Assurance. After I'd worked at Magic Kingdom for about 7-8 months or so, we had an open bidding and I ended up transferring over to Hollywood Studios as my main park. I still worked at Magic Kingdom occasionally at Epcot picking up other shifts. But Disney's MGM Studios, which is what it was actually known at the time, actually became my home base, and that's where I was most of the time. Disney MGM Studios at the time also had our main offices for Photopass. That was kind of our main headquarters for all of Walt Disney World. And it had our QA department. One of the things you may not realize is that every single picture that Disney Photopass takes of you at Disney parks are all screened. Every single one of them. They're all reviewed by a QA department to make sure that they're up to the standards. QA would sit down and we'd had a room that was just computer terminals, and we would sit and we would look at the pictures and go through them one by one to make sure that every single one was good. They would actually come up in big batches from that one photographer, and you could skim through them real quick, make sure everything was okay, and then go on to the next batch. Because QA was based at MGM Studios at the time, we would be able to keep track of how many pictures were in the queue. In other words, how many were waiting to be reviewed. And there was a certain threshold that if they got behind, which would happen sometimes because, again, Photopass is still new and it's growing rapidly, and at the time it was actually outgrowing what we were able to keep up with. If our queue, or those pictures waiting to be reviewed, got too large, then they would start pulling other people from other places to start reviewing pictures and try to get that queue down. And I was one of those. I had a couple shifts that I worked just QA, but for the most part, I was one that they would pull. And you would go through and find an empty computer location backstage somewhere, or rarely I would actually do a little bit of QA at Cover Story, the place we sold the pictures. We had another terminal that was off on the side there a little bit, so you could watch the counter while you were still QAing pictures too. And it allowed you to go through and review everything. The more photographers we pulled in, and we pull them into our regular base and the QA base and Cover Story and any place we could find a terminal, and we would try to get those pictures that were waiting down. Now, guests could still see their pictures if they were waiting to be reviewed, but QA might make a couple changes with them. QA could make some lighting adjustments that other stations couldn't, and if they found something they didn't like, well, QA also had the option to delete, remove, or even pull them just for review later. That was something that couldn't be done at a regular view station. It gave us opportunities, for example, if a photographer's flash batteries had died and they didn't know. QA should be up fast enough that they would see it before maybe the photographer would realize. And then if we saw that pictures are coming out dark, we could send a message to the photographer and let them know, hey, your flash batteries are dead, change them. And that way they wouldn't lose too many pictures that way or end up with too many that were too dark. And when we were in the QA room, we would constantly communicate and work together and checking each other's work. You know, hey, this picture looks a little questionable. What do you think? That didn't happen real often because most of the time it was pretty easy to tell. But every now and then you get some pictures that the quality just wasn't good, and Disney wanted the quality good. So the biggest thing the QA did was just to make sure that the pictures were good quality, that they were framed right, they captured what they were supposed to, that they weren't out of focus, that the flash had lit up the picture correctly, that it was a nice looking picture. If we had a photographer that was just plain missing the picture, or they were constantly getting crooked castles, or something like that, well, we could actually look at that too and then send a note on to management saying, hey, you need to check this photographer, go straighten their castle, go help them out, let them know what's going on. And it would allow the managers to be able to get spot on with the photographers as well. But the other thing the QA did, and its other main purpose, was to make sure that there weren't any inappropriate pictures that were getting out there. And sometimes they would be kind of humorous. One that we loved that somebody had actually printed out and stuck up in the QA room that said, don't take this photo, was of a little baby who was eating some Cheetos. Now, of course, babies aren't necessarily the most nimbly dexterous people at all. And so this poor baby is sitting there trying to hold a Cheeto while inadvertently he's flipping off the camera. And it was a funny picture, it was a cute picture, but because it was a rude gesture, we couldn't sell it. So it actually had to be deleted from the account, but not before we had it printed up as an example of something to look out for. You would occasionally see people behind the scenes of a picture doing things that they shouldn't. And that wasn't always good. Yes, the photographer is supposed to be watching the crowd around. Sometimes that's tough, and so the QA was the backup for that. So if you saw somebody in the background, say, making a rude gesture towards the camera, I can remember one where really nice family photo, and there was a lady behind them that they hadn't seen that flashed the camera. Nice lady, really? You might have people making gestures that seemed okay to them, and the photographer might not realize it, but could be completely misinterpreted in other cultural contexts. For example, the okay sign. There are a lot of places that what we Americans think of as just saying okay is a very rude, vulgar, crude gesture. And so we wouldn't allow it in the pictures. So if we would see something like that, we'd have to clear it. If we saw certain clothing articles that weren't appropriate, occasionally you would get a little kid that was trying to hug a character or something and their clothing had moved. That wasn't going to go through. And so you had to be really careful sometimes. Maybe a character inadvertently has their hands in a place that isn't in a great location. The characters, the one thing that most of the furs have is a very limited ability to see. And of course, they've got all that fur and everything else, and so it's hard for them sometimes to see what they're doing. Sometimes you end up with a fur that's trying to hold their arms around somebody and the hand gets in the wrong spot. Or you end up with a little kid that runs up to say, give Goofy a big hug, and poor Goofy ends up with a head right where it hurts. And so those kinds of pictures, the photographer shooting away, and as a QA, you'd have to go, nope, that's not going to happen. And you'd have to delete those. Those kinds of shots do happen occasionally. You may also end up with a photo that the photographer in all innocence thought was a cute picture. I mean, I can remember one time I took a picture over at Epcot of a couple kids that were playing on a playground there, and I thought it would be a neat picture as they're playing on these rocks, that as they jumped off of the rocks, that I would take a picture of them flying through the air. Cute shot! I got a note from QA a little bit later. hey, that one might be a safety violation. Oh, hadn't even thought about that. Okay. Didn't take that picture anymore. We did actually have a jump shot that we could do where people stood on the ground and then jumped and we would catch them mid-jump. But jumping off of things, yeah, that was a no-no, which QA caught me on. The one thing I really remember is on one of those shifts where I was in that QA room, though. There was probably 15, 20 of us all going through pictures and trying to make sure everything was okay. As I'm sitting there at my computer terminal scanning through batches of pictures, all of a sudden the girl behind me screams. Ah! Okay, that just scared the crud out of me. What on earth? There's no critters. Is it a spider? And you turn around and she's hiding her face. What's wrong with your picture? It's just somebody else delete it. I don't want to see it. If you've been to a store to buy swimsuits, you may have seen something called a suntan swimsuit that allows the sun to give you a suntan through the suit. Women particularly like them when they're trying to get a tan with no tan lines. Well, this family was at one of the water parks enjoying the day. Mom had apparently bought one of these swimsuits. And they're enjoying the park. They decided it was time to get a family photo. And what Mom apparently didn't realize was that the swimsuits don't just let sunlight in, they let all light in. All of our photographers use a flash, which lit up. Let's just say those pictures got deleted in a hurry because they were showing things that Mom really didn't want to be showing. And you would run into that occasionally. In my several shifts, I would say Photopass probably saw at least one picture like that a week, probably more. So here's a hint, folks. If you're going to go to a water park, and especially if you're thinking about taking some photos, don't wear a suntan suit, please. But that's how Disney keeps the pictures safe and keeps them appropriate and makes sure that you have great photos and that somebody isn't doing something to mess your photo up. It's how we would catch people doing bunny ears to the characters, or maybe rude gestures behind the characters that the photographer didn't see, or other inappropriate things. And it's how we help to make sure that you had some great photos. It was fun. I enjoyed taking pictures more, but it was a nice occasional change of pace, and it was really neat to see how they made sure that all the guests had great photos. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little look at Photopass and QA. If you had some weird photos that did get through, or maybe that your family took at Disney or a theme park, I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget to comment in the link below. If you did like the video, please don't forget to hit that share button as well. Thank you again to my patrons who help me out in so many ways and keep up the support. Thank you to you for watching as well. And sometimes when you did them, you didn't. I started with Photopass when it was about a year old or so. And so while I was working there, that has nothing to do with anything. I don't even know where I was going with that. Okay. Over at Magic Kingdom, it was in yeah. Inside the Magic Kingdom, it was over at the Grand Expo in the middle of... Okay. But Hollywood Studios, at the time Disney MGM Studios, ended up becoming... Yeah, when it becoming. Okay. Because it was based at Hollywood... Its other main purpose was to make sure. If you liked the video, please don't. How do you